My fiancée once scribbled, "Monogamy is fear-based thinking." Soon after, she postponed our wedding, on her guru's advice. Then I learned she'd slept with him to expand spiritually. Now I'm exposing their entire scheme, and neither of them saw it coming. Let me rewind. Let me take you back to a time when the words guru, and spiritual expansion, and betrayal and weren't the cornerstones of my vocabulary. Back to a time when I was just Ben, a slightly cynical but hopelessly romantic architect, head over heels in love with a woman named Anya. Anya was vibrant, a whirlwind of artistic energy, a painter who saw the world in a kaleidoscope of colors I could only glimpse. She was everything I wasn't: spontaneous, free-spirited, and deeply engaged with the esoteric. I, on the other hand, was grounded, practical, and found solace in the clean lines of blueprints and the predictable strength of steel. We met at a gallery opening. I was there to support a friend. She was exhibiting her latest series, a collection of abstract canvases that pulsed with an unsettling energy. I remember being drawn to her, not just by her obvious beauty, the cascade of fiery red hair, the piercing green eyes, but by the palpable intensity that radiated from her. She seemed to exist on a different plane, untouched by the mundane concerns that preoccupied my mind. Our courtship was a whirlwind. Anya introduced me to a world I never knew existed, a world of chakra alignments, aura readings, and vegan potlucks. I, in turn, offered her stability, a safe harbor from the turbulent seas of her artistic temperament. We were opposites, yes, but we balanced each other, or so I thought. The proposal was perfect, at least in my eyes. A candlelit dinner on the rooftop of my apartment building, overlooking the city skyline, a vintage ring I'd spent months searching for. She said, yes, of course, her eyes brimming with tears. We were going to build a life together, a beautiful, unconventional life filled with art, love, and maybe even a little bit of spiritual mumbo-jumbo that I was slowly starting to tolerate. Then came the guru. His name was Rohan, and he was everything I instinctively distrusted. Charismatic, impeccably dressed in flowing white robes, and radiating an almost unsettling sense of calm. Anya met him at a yoga retreat in Sedona, and from the moment she returned, things started to shift. She spoke of Rohan constantly, quoting his pronouncements on everything from diet to relationships. He was, according to her, spiritual guide, and beacon of enlightenment, and the key to unlocking her full potential. I tried to be supportive, to understand her newfound passion, but something about Rohan felt off. He had this way of looking at you, this intense, unwavering gaze that made you feel simultaneously exposed and insignificant. And his teachings, while couched in flowery language about love and acceptance, seemed to subtly undermine everything I believed in. The first sign of trouble was the postponement of the wedding. Anya announced it one evening, over a dinner of quinoa and kale chips, her voice strangely detached. And Rohan feels that we need more time to prepare, to cleanse ourselves of limiting beliefs before we commit to each other, and she said, avoiding my gaze. I was stunned. We'd already sent out the invitations, booked the venue, and tasted countless wedding cakes. And prepare for what? And I asked, my voice barely a whisper. And cleanse ourselves of what? And of the societal conditioning that dictates our relationships, and she replied, her eyes gleaming with a fervor I hadn't seen before. And of the fear-based thinking that prevents us from truly connecting with our higher selves, and That's when she scribbled that infamous sentence on a napkin: monogamy is fear-based thinking. It felt like a punch to the gut. The next few weeks were a blur of arguments, apologies, and strained silences. Anya spent most of her time at Rohan's and spiritual center, and a sprawling ranch outside the city, attending workshops and deepening her understanding. And I tried to talk to her, to reason with her, but she seemed to have retreated into a world I couldn't reach. I started doing my own research on Rohan. What I found wasn't reassuring. He had a string of failed businesses, a trail of disgruntled followers, and a reputation for exploiting vulnerable women. The more I dug, the more convinced I became that he was a charlatan, preying on Anya's insecurities and manipulating her for his own gain. I confronted her with my findings, but she dismissed them as misinformation and attacks from those who fear enlightenment, and she accused me of being closed-minded, of trying to control her, of stifling her spiritual growth. Then came the final blow. A mutual friend, Sarah, who had also been attending Rohan's workshops, contacted me. She was distraught, disillusioned, and terrified. She told me that Rohan was encouraging his female followers to engage in and sacred unions and with him, claiming that it was necessary for their spiritual advancement. And he says it's a way to transcend the ego and experience pure consciousness, and Sarah sobbed. And He says it's not about sex, it's about energy, and quat. I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't believe it, but deep down, I knew it was true. I confronted Anya again, this time with Sarah's testimony. She didn't deny it. She simply said that it was and quat, private matter and quat, and that I wouldn't understand. And quat. So you slept with him? And quat? I asked, the words tasting like poison in my mouth. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a strange mixture of pity and condescension. And quat? It wasn't about sex. Ben, and quat, she said. And quat? It was about spiritual expansion. And quat? That was it. That was the breaking point. The moment when the last vestiges of love and trust withered and died. I left. I packed my bags and walked out of our apartment, leaving behind the life we had built together, the dreams we had shared, and the woman I thought I knew. For weeks, I wandered in a daze, numb with grief and betrayal. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't even bring myself to go to work. I felt like I had been ripped apart, my heart torn out and stomped on. But slowly, as the initial shock wore off, anger began to simmer beneath the surface. Anger at Anya, for her naivete and her betrayal. Anger at Rohan, for his manipulation and his lies. And anger at myself, for being so blind, so trusting, so willing to believe in something that was too good to be true. I knew I couldn't just let it go. I couldn't just walk away and pretend that none of it had happened. Rohan was hurting people, preying on vulnerable women, and profiting from their desperation. He needed to be stopped, and that's when I decided to expose him. I started small, contacting other former followers, gathering information, building a case. It wasn't easy. Many were afraid to speak out, fearing retribution or simply too ashamed to admit they had been duped. But slowly, painstakingly, I pieced together the truth about Rohan and his and quat, spiritual center, and quat. He wasn't just a charlatan. He was a predator. He used his charisma and his teachings to manipulate women into giving him money, labor, and even sexual favors. He isolated them from their families and friends, brainwashed them into believing his lies, and controlled every aspect of their lives. The more I learned, the more determined I became to bring him down. I started a blog, documenting my findings, and sharing the stories of his victims. I contacted journalists, hoping to get the story out to a wider audience. I even hired a lawyer, exploring the possibility of legal action. It was a long, arduous process, filled with setbacks and frustrations. Rohan had powerful allies, wealthy donors, who were willing to protect him at all costs. He also had a team of lawyers who were experts in silencing dissent. But I refused to give up. I knew that I was fighting for something bigger than myself, for the women who had been hurt by Rohan, for the people who were still under his spell. And then, finally, my efforts began to pay off. A major newspaper published an expose on Rohan, detailing his history of fraud, manipulation, and abuse. The story went viral, sparking outrage and condemnation. Former followers came forward in droves, sharing their stories and corroborating my claims. The authorities launched an investigation, and Rohan's and quat, spiritual center and quat, was raided. He was arrested and charged with multiple counts of fraud, sexual assault, and conspiracy. The trial was a media circus. Rohan maintained his innocence, claiming that he was the victim of a witch hunt, a conspiracy by jealous rivals and disgruntled former followers. But the evidence against him was overwhelming. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury found him guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to a long prison term, his empire crumbling around him. Anya, of course, was devastated. She refused to believe that Rohan was guilty, clinging to the belief that he was a victim of injustice. I tried to reach out to her, to offer her support, but she wouldn't listen. She was too deeply entrenched in her delusion to see the truth. I don't know what will happen to her. I hope that one day she will wake up and realize what Rohan has done to her, to all of us. But I can't save her. She has to save herself. As for me, I'm still trying to pick up their pieces of my life. The betrayal has left deep scars, scars that may never fully heal. But I'm also stronger now, more resilient, more aware of the darkness that lurks beneath the surface of the human soul. I've learned that love is not blind. It sees everything, even the things we don't want to see. And that sometimes, the greatest act of love is to walk away. I'm back to designing buildings, creating spaces that are both beautiful and functional, that offer shelter and inspiration. I'm still a cynic, perhaps even more so than before. But I'm also a survivor. And I know that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope. Hope for healing, hope for redemption, hope for a better future. The world may not be a perfect place, but it's still worth fighting for. And I, for one, am not giving up.